Hello and welcome to the Tech Lunch Podcast, where we encourage our listeners to learn something new about tech every week. This can range from learning about new and exciting applications to the advancements in coding and technology. If you are always learning, you will always be a step above the rest. Take the time during lunch or during a break to listen and learn, kind of like a lunch and learn, but for the ears. This podcast will open the listener's ears to new and exciting technologies they may have not been purviewed to in the past. These topics will range from manufacturing technologies to data collection technologies and everything in between. Hello, I'm Nick.
Hello, I'm Ed.
And this week we don't have John with us, so hopefully everything's good. Spend time with family. But we got Ed back. As you heard us last week, he's preparing for the cybersecurity challenge, is it, Ed?
Yeah, PCDC. So basically, it's just the competition that basically takes other technical colleges, and we compete against each other. You have a blue team and a red team, so I'll be involved with the blue team.
Oh, okay. Awesome. And, the funny part is that kind of goes, I think, a little bit into, this week's topic when we start talking about, the software behind it is, and also when you talk about like the 3D printers that we talk about, kind of the same thing. It's log analysis and why do it? Why are we doing it? And that the big thing is first we need to talk about how we get to that point. I can pull logs of a server all day, every day, off of a switch, off of a 3D printer. Why can't I take those logs and move them over to like a log stash Kabana instance? What do you think about when you start thinking about freaking, log analysis?
So there are different types of logs, and you have logs that basically like system logs, like Windows has system logs that you can look at. You have event logs that you can look at. But when you start to dig a little deeper, like when you use stuff like Nexus or you use stuff like Nmap, or if you use Wireshark where you're trying to see a pattern, that's where the logs come into place, because then you can start to see what happened at this instance. So this is really a good tool for like data analysis. Mm-hmm. If you want to, maybe you want to see what's the throughput of a machine.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to see what happened at a certain time in a server, or maybe you want to see the login events when something happened. Maybe that event had something to do with an event that happened that maybe didn't compromise a system, but it was an anomaly. Yeah. And you want to understand what this anomaly is.
Yeah, something like a trend analysis and stuff like that.
Right.
Historical trend analysis. That is in its nutshell. What we're looking at. Like for example, for me, when especially like at work, I pull all my logs and I kind of look at what's going on. Is there a configuration issue? Is it what is that configuration issue doing? What is it causing? Because I have system logs, I have OS logs, I've got my module logs since dealing with modular system. I'm dealing with all these different logs, but I can combine them into one. Log stash them using a system called Logstash, and it pipes all my logs over to a repository, better known as Kabana, or Elk, to an Elk stack, and then I can go in and search through my logs. It's also we also got another type of system that we use now that will take all of our network traffic and stuff like that and break it down and tell us exactly what's going on. Like for example, if my database is getting hit repeatedly, I can see what the latest SQL queries are that are telling me that it's asking for and why they're taking so long and stuff like that, and their point of origin. So I can go back and look at where these things came from, also with the user accounts attached to it, stuff like that, kind of see, that type of stuff. But, for me, it's more or less understanding, if something happens, how do I go back and prevent that from happening again?
And that's really important if you're compromised ever.
Yeah.
The first thing you want to know is what happened, how it happened, and when it happened.
Yeah. At
Then,
what level did I get hit?
and right, then you can look and see that maybe the implementations that you put in place or the countermeasures that you interacted from before or patching or whatever you did or did not do, what impact did that have?
Most time did not.
And then one of the real, I want to say one of the real gems about using logs is, say for example, I rolled out a patch, and after that patch I saw some anomalies, a service that is not able to launch, or a service that was running that wasn't running before. Now I can go back and look at before I did the patch and after I did the patch by looking at the logs to see what I saw. So like things like when we saw Nmap is not just looking at, for example, Wireshark is really a protocol analyzer. So it's looking at maybe I want to see what's going on with TCP or UDP or one of those things.
Yeah,
and I want to analyze some packets. But when I use Nexus or Nmap, I can look at services. I can look at, like we was talking about, packet information. I can look at logs for what attempt was trying to go to a certain port.
Yep.
So all those things you can do. You know, those are important things if you ever change software or if you ever think that you've been compromised or if you just want to see if something persistent in your system.
Yeah. And the thing is, it'll also tell you, you know, did I oops, you know, and we know what I mean by, you know, did I oops. And it's, you know, did I forget to, you know, turn something on or turn something off or open something, close something, because I have a system outage. You know, why did I get the system outage? Well, let's go find out. You know, if the server is still running or the piece of software is still running, it's producing logs, which means then you can dig into those logs and find out why you've now brought something to a standing halt. It's like, for example, you talk about Wireshark. I love it. You know, I love Wireshark. I used it a lot when we were initially, you know, at work pretty much doing commissioning. I would use Wireshark to, you know, look through the throughput and watch the industrial control systems talking back and forth between the MES system. You know, and I'd see and make sure that, okay, cool, this is up and running before we had a monitoring system attached on top of it. Because, you know, if you're talking about like a Siemens-based system, you can go through the scalants. All you got to do is mirror port 1 to port 3 or port 4, whatever port you want to go through, and, you know, view it in Wireshark in real-time data.
Which, when you're talking port mirroring, that's really an effective tool for looking at some of the things you can do with analyzing data. One of the other things that's important about when you're talking about looking at logs, it's not just about if it was an incident. It's not even just about if something changed when I did patching. Logs are good because you understand your baseline.
Yeah.
I can take this log, these set of logs, and say, hey, this baseline we were here. Hey, something changed. Why did something change? So you can use this as maybe what we call a canary system in the mine.
Yeah, like a get back system.
And we can see, hey, look, this is where we were before. This is where we are now. We're better or worse. Why did we get better? Why did we get worse? Then you can use those things to maybe implement into another type of technology or another type of platform or another type of protocol.
Yeah, makes sense.
Maybe you're using some protocol that's specific to a type of technology, like maybe we're using CAN bus.
Yeah.
Maybe we're using Profinet. Maybe we're using Modbus. And those things are unique to certain systems.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to understand what's going on. DeviceNet. Those things are unique to certain systems.
Right. And, you know, I think with that, you know, it's not segregating data. At that point, you're kind of combining data and kind of seeing what's going on. Because most of the time you start dealing with, you know, high-level, you know, log management systems and stuff like that, it'll let you parse whatever log you send it as long as it's in a .log format, which most systems will put out .log. It's how it goes. It's not going to be any different. So, you know, it'll parse out all these log files. You know, Kibana is my favorite. It's, you know, what I'm used to. But the thing is with that, you know, it's where I can parse anything and everything I've got. And so, like you said, the different protocols and stuff like that, as long as I get a log file on it, I can view what's going on. I can see, do I have a communication failure going between these two processes and why? And the thing is, and if I can't, you know, decipher that log, then I pull out a Wireshark and I view it in real time and kind of see, you know, what's going on, or use a industry specific tool to be able to do it for me.
And the thing with logs, I would suggest you leverage those logs with some system like Kibana with an elk stack, or with some type of system that does collecting, that you can take all of that data and maybe you can put that data in some type of database, and that database can be fed it. Maybe you can fed it across some type of not AI, but maybe you can fed it across filters.
Well,
and those filters can give you some things that you can use for dashboards.
Like, for example, you know, I use a lot of, you know, logs from IoT systems. And so from that, I can tell, do I need to open up a rule on my MQTT? Do I need to close a rule on my MQTT? Do I need to open up a follow-on rule based on, you know, whatever deployment I'm doing? You know, to push it to, you know, one of the Apache services that we use to show it up on the front end. You know, do I need to open up something like that? You know, and I look at it and it's, okay, cool, it failed. Okay, cool. Guess what? Now I'm going to go open up this and send out the rebuild, you know, for it to take place. Well, guess what? Welcome to, you know, coding, deploying, and rebuilding again. You know, DevOps. It's what you get to. It's the DevOps mentality, log viewing, log stashing, whatever you want to call it, log analysis. That is DevOps in a nutshell.
So, I mean, when we're talking DevOps and we're talking going back through that process, so we're talking waterfall or we're talking agile?
It's agile.
And what's the benefits of using waterfall or agile or waterfall?
Well, you know, we start really digging into a DevOps mentality using, say, log analysis, for example. Agile is on the fly. You know, let me see this and let me go by sprint, by sprint, by sprint. And, you know, a lot of the stuff you talked about, like DevOps, it's automatic deployments. So as you finish it, it automatically deploys it once it's approved in the pipeline. You know, it goes through Jenkins, and Jenkins pushes out and stuff like that, and off it goes. Or you get, like, use GitLab or something like that, you know, something around that corner. However, so your benefit of Agile is, like, in a sprint fashion. You get more done, you know, little by little by little. So you can take
sprint fashion. Can you explain just a little bit in case we have laymen that don't understand?
Yeah.
What do we mean by sprint fashion?
A sprint fashion, or, you know, I call it sprint fashion. Most of the time when we talk about Agile, it's a sprint. Okay. A sprint is where you get your tasks for that time frame, and you vote. Well, not really vote, but you rate those tasks on how long you think it's going to take. So you give it points. You know, is it 1 point or is it 5 points or anything in between? 5 points is the highest one I can give it. That's a long-term project. So that is anything that's going to take the entire duration of that sprint to finish. Usually when we see a 5-point story come across us, we break it down into. So, for example, if you tell me that, hey, we've got this, or if we look at something, we find out that we got this PLC program that doesn't work. There's a bug in it, and we can see it in the logs. So, and mind you, this is not based off of project build, okay? So it's different if you're using, like, looking at logs and determining what fixes I have to make. You know, two possibly different things. However, they cross in the same road at, like, your sprint planning. So, for example, I know my sprint is going to be a 1 week or 2 week duration sprint. So Monday to Friday, Monday to Friday. My sprint review or my sprint planning is Monday. My sprint retrospective is on Friday. That's my sprint review the following week. So I know that for that week, I can have at least, at a minimum, 2 5-point stories. So one for 1 week, one for another week. I don't want to go to 10 because that's you don't do that, because for some reason they don't, like in agile you like to use like 1 to 5, which doesn't make any sense, but whatever. So they use 1 to 5, and then so it's like, or you can use whatever. Most of the time it's 1 to 5. It's up to whoever the scrum master is, and that's the person who leads the sprint that tells you kind of what you're doing.
So.
Right?
Just another quick question, because I want you to keep going on what you're going on. How does the Scrum Master affects in a positive way and a negative way on the sprint?
That really just depends. To be honest with you, they can push and say, hey, guess what? We want to get this many stories done. For this sprint, or it's like, hey, let's get as many as we can done, and let's not, burn out. We have time. It's also one that will actively look at it and go through the stories and go, that's not right. Push it back to refinement. Let the guys in the back refine that a little bit. Gather more requirements. Tell us what they want. Your scrum masters who just want to get it done, those guys are the ones that are going to cause you problems, because they don't read the stories. They don't refine them. They don't send them back to the backlog if they got to be regroomed, and stuff like that. So, but the thing is, when you start getting back into, the actual sprint time that we're dealing with, week to 2 weeks. So technically you have, 9 days, 8 days to build something during that time. And it could be anything like, 1-point story, add a button. Add a button here. Okay, that's 1 story done. Send it. You can do there. You create the button real quick. Move the story over to done. Then the testing team takes over. They test that button. Make sure it works. Send it to the Git.
So another question. So testing versus QA, is it the same or different?
It's kind of the same thing. And y'all, if you're getting a weird, saturation, I guess you'd say, of speaking, of noise, we're sorry. So QA and testing are kind of the same thing, because quality assurance and testing, they make your user stories, they make your test stories, they make all of that. They're also the ones executing the test. However, in Scrum or in Agile, the developer does the testing. So, for example, if you write 1 piece of code, I write 1 piece of code, you'll test my code, I'll test your code. So, it is kind of how, that happens. And it's also a test on the fly. So, as soon as you move it to done, I take done, I move to test. And then if that doesn't work, I move it back to the backlog. And you pull it back in again. It's a cycle. It's a circle. A giant circle. But, the definition of done is based on the requirements. So the definition of done, for example, from you and me, is I have this drive, and I want it to do this. I want this drive to move forward. Okay. My definition of done is I can move that drive forward 3.5 feet. Okay. Move it 3.5 feet, you're done. That's your definition of done. I move it 1.5 feet, I move it, okay, well, that failed. Move it back to the backlog, and then the next programmer can come by and pick it and say, I want to work on that.
So how would you incorporate buzzing into that process?
Ugh. That's interesting. I don't know.
Because the user at the end of the day is the person using the software.
Yeah. And the thing is that's when a lot of times you use a lot of, UAT type of stuff. I think UATs is a great way of doing it. Usually that's at the end of the project or in the middle of the project, depending on how you want to look at it. So, it just really just depends.
And then another thing I would wonder is, how do you leverage user logs to see the efficiency of your application or the software that you implemented in the field, that it's actually providing the benefits that you when you drew it up as a flow chart. You say, hey, this is what I think the benefits of this will be. These are the improvements. How do you leverage those two things and compare them with like the user log to see how the user is using it? How do you deal with a user using it differently than the way you thought that it would be implemented or used?
Well, usually when we start talking about user type logs and stuff like that, you're really looking at what piece of functionality in your system is being used the most, or used at all. We've had instances of where we've built software that no one's touched. It's a function. Everybody goes, "Oh, I want this." You didn't use it, so we've had that before, where it's like, okay, cool, you wanted it, but you don't use it. Well, why not? Well, I found a different way of doing it. Okay, fair enough. How did you do that so I can roll this back into the system? Well, this. Okay, so let's build that. So we'll kind of work our way back around. Refinement.
So is the user log a tool that you can use to draw out that data, and can you set up some type of trends or use maybe Kibana to, grab some data points to see how they're actually using it?
Yes. To all of it, actually. Because, Kibana is great for finding out your presentation layer use cases. Because it's going to tell you kind of what's going on. Because the good thing about AngularJS and Apache, it logs everything. And then you attach that to a SSO server, and it logs who the user is. So now you have all the way down to the user who did it. Which is a great way to find out if a user did something bad. And you can easily find it. It's not without a shadow of a doubt. But at least you're in the ballpark. Now, when you start using that to determine functionality use, is you're looking at screens, because it's going to flag in there what that screen is. The only problem is you may not know what that screen's called in the back end. You don't know what it's called in the logs. So you got to kind of, play devil's advocate. And the thing is then I can do a historical trend analysis on that screen, on that piece of functionality, and see how long it's been used. Did somebody start touching it this week or 2.5 months ago? When was it actually used? Was it used when I told you to use it? Or I said, hey, why don't you use this? Or was it used when I said, hey, guess what? The release is done. Your functionality's in it. Why don't you touch it for? Why don't you take a gander? But usually that's when we do a UAT prior to any type of deployments and stuff like that, and that's kind of where that agile functionality goes. It's test this real quick. I'll look at the logs. If you say there's a bug, I look at the logs. I kind of see what's going on. You write it up. And you write it up in a fashion that tells me, what you did to get to that point. What is the actual outcome of that test? What is the expected outcome of that test? And then I go back and I test it myself, but I also look at the logs. And I kind of see, okay, do I have a trigger point at something that's not really working?
So, question. I like for you to explain to the listeners what UAT is.
Mm-hmm.
Just a short synopsis. We don't have to go in deep detail. We don't have to do a deep dive. The other thing is, why do users use software differently than the way you originally implemented it? Generally, not because a person just say, hey, not click monkeys. Mm-hmm. And if I offend anybody, I'm sorry, but that's just a term.
Yeah.
How about we don't say click monkey? How about we say click clickers?
Yeah.
So click clickers.
We used to we used to say ass in seats. Is how you get things tested. And to be honest with you, it's probably the truest statement you ever make. Ass and seats. Because what is a UAT? It's a UAT where I give you is a user acceptance test. It's where I give you every single story you asked for, and you go in and test it in my integration environment. And you tell me if it works. If it does not work, you tell me why. Then I take that and I go back to the drawing board and I fix it, bring it back, run it through a UAT again, which then that tells me, okay, cool, did the actual fix that I made work, or did it not? And that's where I kind of want that response. Now, that's what a UAT is in a nutshell. Users are doing the testing, and they're accepting the fixes, and they're accepting the test. Now, if it is kind of, you're talking about, why do some users do something differently than how it's programmed? They may find a different way of doing it.
But before I want you to keep that thought. When we say they use a different way of using it, how did they get to that point? Did we not implement our strategy correctly, or they're just thinking different than the way we program?
I just say never underestimate a user. Never underestimate a user. Users will find 15,000 ways of using something different. For example, okay, whoever made the door latch on a door, inside of a home, designed that for a door to close, lock, and lock on. No one knew, hundreds of years later, that somebody would be using it as a bottle opener. So, and the thing is like whoever designed, for example, and I hope this podcast is not beating people's ears up. However, I know for a fact, if you think about it, the guy who developed the lighter, okay, that was designed to light something on fire, probably light a cigar. That was the only way it was made. However, give it to this day, where we're using it to do shrink wrapping, we're using it to cauterize freaking, injuries, we're using it to open bottles, we're using it to, at sometimes, tartan on a vehicle, and to do other things no one ever had an idea it was going to be used for. And no one knew it was going to turn into a bad luck charm, too, for those who are superstitious. Never underestimate a user. It's like, well as I do in the industrial, automation game, that a user can find the loophole in every piece of equipment out there. Even though you don't plan for that loophole to be open, they figure out a way to weasel their way through it. But the thing is usually with that, when that happens, we pull the user aside and say, okay, cool, what'd you do? Tell me. So now I can program that into my system for it to work later, the way that you design. However, the problem is once you do that, then they do a different way again.
But
they found something else.
But here's important. It's an important thing that you just said. So I'm gonna give it to you from an OT environment. If I make a input, or if I ask a person for input, if I do input validation, then I don't have to worry about that person putting in a value that's outside of the data type I use.
Yeah.
If I say, hey, I can only use 0 to 255, then I limit my entries to 0 to 255. You cannot go outside of those values.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff can be done based on what we know could be a problem. If I know that I got an SQL query, I don't leave that query open so somebody can put in any type of query to attack my system. So some of the things you can do, because we know that these things have been done in the past.
Yeah.
What they do in the future, it's fine, because that just makes the system better.
Yeah.
You learn from what to do. You learn what to keep
and what to toss. Yep, exactly. And the thing is logs are, probably one of the greatest and misunderstood applications and technology total. Everybody thinks a log is a problem because they don't want to read a log. They really don't want to do that. However, logs save your tail on more than one occasion. It'll tell you, oh, you had a missed character here in the SQL statement. You had this programmed wrong. It doesn't like this. Okay, cool. Now I know where to fix it and where to make changes for my system to actually act better, along with trying to help the user understand what exactly they did wrong. And, it's one of those things. It's like if you think about it from your side doing industrial controls for so long, how do you use logs?
So the biggest thing with logs is do not use it as a tool to blame. Use it as a tool to understand what went wrong in the situation.
Exactly.
Now there are some times you have to use it to point out to somebody that they did something wrong. Maybe they don't understand what they did wrong.
Yeah.
But in a log, you can see the events that happen. So think of a log as an event tracker. It tracks the events that happen.
Yep.
Whether it's Windows, Linux, network communication, database verification, whatever it is. Even if you're doing a software implementation.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, guys. But even if you're doing those things, you want to know what you did wrong. Like when you use a software package and you're typing in things, it's keeping up with that. When you use Word, it's tracking that you typed in something that's incorrect based on a dictionary that it had.
Right.
That it was taught by what you typed in previously. So these tools that we have that are logs are not to be used as, I need this to be able to make the next wanted poster.
Yeah.
What you need to use the log for is how can the system be made better? What was not working with the system? And then the other thing is you can understand the health of what you're doing. I mean, the worst thing for a designer or a developer is to develop software and nobody gives any feedback to the end and say, hey, it just didn't work.
Right.
But what didn't work?
Yeah, what about it? And the thing is, what about it did not work? And the thing is like I have to agree with you 110% because I hate, without a shadow of a doubt, when somebody goes, well, I looked at the logs and I found this user's name. Why? Why are you doing that? Well, I need to see who did it. Why? Well, so it's their fault. Why? Well, I don't know. That's what I was told. Okay. Well, your management failed you. Because if you're having to play the blame game and point the finger at somebody and say, "Oh, this person did this," and you're tattletaling on somebody, you're being 3 again or 4.
And what's the purpose of that? The purpose is not to identify who did it. The purpose should be to identify why they did it and why it was necessary to do that.
Right, exactly. And the thing is but there's too many people out there right now who are wrapped around the axle to prove the reason that somebody else did it and they were not responsible for it. The blame game. Quit kicking the can down the road so it's no longer your problem. It's their problem. They have to deal with it. Y'all, do not use logs for that. Stop. Stop using logs for the blame game. Because that's also a great way to have every single person in your entire company hate the IT department.
Well,
in a hurry.
Here's the idea, Nick. What if I put something in your car and you didn't know that I wrote a code that's in your car? And I'm tracking how you drive. Maybe you're driving a certain way because a certain day you're more careful when it's raining. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's a day that you're in traffic and some idiot cuts in front of you and you have to do some defensive driving to get around this guy to quit from backing in him. Mm-hmm. Am I being a reckless driver or am I being
something more progressive?
So you have to be careful at what you take from logs. The ideal of a log is to understand what happened in that instance, not who did it in that instance.
Right, and that's the same exact thing. That's the big issue with that Progressive and Geico thing they plug in your OBD2 port. They throttle response and look, we were really good when we didn't use our phone while we were driving, and all this other crap. No, y'all, you can't see the big picture unless you got a camera in my car watching me drive. Nope.
And understand everything that's happening outside of the environment that I'm driving in. Because driving at 5 o'clock in a metropolitan area as opposed to driving at 3 o'clock in a rural area is not the same criteria and will not give the same data points.
Exactly. So, it is what it is at this point. But, we tell you, please don't do that. Don't be crazy about it. Do, actual log analysis. Find out why your systems aren't working. Really get involved in that type of stuff. But, I know we're going over time. We're going to keep this one a little bit shorter than usual. So, I just want to say thank you. We took a week off there in a little bit, and, we have not had a single missed day. And, we want to say thank you. We're seeing the locations move around and stuff like that. Seeing more and more people from all over the world listening to us. And we love it. We thank you. We really do. It's awesome. It gives us reason to do this. So let me pass over to Ed for the closing remarks. Y'all have a good one.
So how you doing, guys? I just want to say last week I had some things going on because I'm preparing for a competition, and I apologize for not being here last week. But what I would like to do is challenge you guys. I would like for you guys to challenge us and give us some things that we're doing right or wrong. But the other thing is we're thinking about doing a Patreon where we'll give special content to our Patreon members. So if you guys are interested in that, will you please reach out to the website and let us know if that's something you're interested in, and we'll set up a Patreon account and we'll actually do special content for you guys. Or if you need mentoring, we will actually get with you guys and set up some mentoring if you want to do some things. So reach out to Vulcanara, and we would like to do those things. And we haven't forgot about that. We will be giving a giveaway once we reach 3,000 viewers.
Yep.
Once we get to 3,000 viewers, we will give a giveaway. We'll explain what it will be. It will be epic, and we do appreciate everything you do. And we would like to just say that John wasn't here this week because he has some things with his family. But we hope everything's going good with his family, and we appreciate everything you guys do.
There you go. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Tech at Lunch podcast, where we hope you learned something about tech during your break or during your lunchtime. If you did, please give us a follow to prevent missing future episodes. If you have any ideas or something you want to hear or learn about, please send us a show idea to podcast@vulcanara.com. Hope you have a good rest of the day and continue learning.